previously, the way that work got done historically, it was just based around a person's time. So Johnny Dunning, 5 days a week. But with the use of AI, if what used to take me 5 days a week only now takes me 3 days a week or 4 days a week, whatever it is, then is time the best thing to just be measuring that on?
Indeed, yeah.
And whereas actually it's like, what am I achieving? Maybe I can do more.
Yeah.
So like outputs is just becoming more of a thing, and the world has moved to more of a services-based economy, and the flexibility required in having that outsourced network, what I feel like it means people don't have to move away from is kind of the approach that I perceive as sometimes a bit lazy historically, where organisations will just say, just get some bums on seats doing something. And it's like, well, what are you trying to achieve? What's the outcome? And again, I think that ties back into business strategy, doesn't it? In the terms of you're probably sitting down with some of your stakeholders and trying to get them thinking about how what they do relates to the strategy.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because I see my team's job to be fulfilling that role, as you say, to sit down with our stakeholders internally and understand what their challenges are, and actually start working with on their requirements before they even know they need to go to the market. So you're talking to these guys every day, every week, and getting a feel for their challenges and their problems, and helping solve those problems with them. And then when you're then looking to go to the market to fulfil that service, you're already thinking about it. So when you put it, it's easier. It becomes easier for them to put it down into a contract. Ultimately, that delivers what you need to do, whether it's outcome based or sometimes actually a time and materials engagement will work for that specific project. But ultimately, the more you work with procurement, I think the better outcomes we'll all get together. And there's a bit of education along the way to see procurement as someone that can help them, rather than as a post box.
And how has your organisation achieved that? Because it sounds, I mean, you mentioned you were just invited to the table, which is brilliant to see. But this type of enlightened approach, I think it's an enlightened approach within procurement that's very closely linked to business objectives. Firstly, either that, I don't know what came first, is chicken and egg here, as to were you invited to the table because there was that approach that was, specifically within the culture of the procurement organisation and the CPO, or is it that was just what the business asked of you guys?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you, because I think we delivered a lot during. So when LSEG acquired Refinitiv, there was a large integration project from 2021, January 21 or February 21, apologies, for 3 years, and we had a lot of. We had to deliver a lot to the market in that time in terms of synergies, both from a cost base and infrastructure, offices, data centers, as well as on the customer side in terms of integrating and having one voice to the customer. So lots of large programs within that, and we had to deliver, and procurement were helping the business achieve those objectives over that 3-year period. And ultimately, the execs, I think, could see the value of what we were delivering, and then would give us the mandate then to continue that evolution in terms of what needs to be delivered in the future. And I think a good example, which I spoke to you previously about, was I think from my area in the workforce piece. A CFO comes in and just wants, okay, tell me where my workforce are, and people are going, okay, great, HR are coming with their data on the people that are on the books in terms of FTEs and FTCs, and we had good data on contingent labour, and it was like, the CFO was like, that's great, but where's the external workforce here? And it was some difficult conversations, but ultimately that set off our workforce program in the sense of then looking at our total workforce across the group, and trying to work through. Okay, well look, regardless of whether they're FTE contract or external, we need that information in one place, and we can then, having that data, going back to data again, having that data, you can then you can start looking forwards, and that this program. It ultimately involved, it had had executive, our CFO, our chief operating officer, our chief people officer, all three, and our chief procurement officer, all involved there in terms of looking at it from a, you have the chief people officer who was a sponsor of this ultimately, in terms of looking at the whole people workforce there. You've got a CFO who wants to understand all of that with what the financial impacts of that, and what sensitivity analysis can be done to make sure that we're as efficient as possible, and the operating officer working across that, and having procurement in the middle of that as well, helping to deliver this has been really interesting actually, and thought-provoking in terms of what our role is in that, in terms of managing that whole total workforce, and how you don't have to get in conversations. You can't limit your knowledge on just on your bit within the external workforce. You have to understand the impacts and when you want to outsource something versus when you want to start actually insource it, and making decisions on what you do internally versus what you do externally, and how.
Yeah, and I feel like that's getting into the really clever stuff. It's like I had a conversation with Lisa Williams from Dow Chemicals in the US. Really interesting conversation, and she's very super passionate about this kind of total workforce approach. But she also has a clear understanding that for most organisations, they'll have their internal workforce pretty dialed. FTEs, FTCs, also their contingent workforce. It's a pretty mature setup in terms of technology, service providers, all that sort of thing. The big gap for most people is services procurement, where it's actually these outsourced service providers. And I had another conversation with another services procurement SME guy called Alan Withers, who works for Matchtech, and he was talking to me about some of the studies he's been doing on the numbers when you look at and go, okay, how many contingent workers do we have? And then look at how many people do we have doing work for us outside of the contingent workers and our full-time who are in our external service providers. Yeah. How many people are accessing the buildings? I hear this all the time. Yeah. People go, how many workers do we have? Yeah. And it's X many. And then they say, well, why have we got 40% more people accessing our systems and doing this and doing that? I find that fascinating. But what you guys have been doing is quite a well-coordinated approach to that, it seems to me.
And I think we've got that because we've had the executive mandate of various members of our exco going, well, we need this information and we think it's important, so we'll invest in that part of we'll invest to deliver what we need to do, and the outcome will be a workforce that they can have complete visibility on and ensure that they're working on the right things. And what I find really interesting actually is that when we talk about workforce, there's no debate about the internal workforce and how it's FTE versus FTC. Yet when we talk about the external workforce, between you and I, we'll say contingent labour, we'll say IT services, is it consultancies? And so what we've tried to do is actually have a definition of it, so we can all speak the same language within the company. So FTE, and FTC is part of that really. But FTE, you've got contractors, which some people say contingent labour, and we've got consultant advisory versus consultant delivery. So advisory is when you give advice, delivery is where they're actually working on a project and delivering outcomes. And then you've got your outsource providers who are doing a managed service. And ultimately, sometimes you don't really care whether they're providing 10 people or 100, because ultimately they're working to a set of SLAs to deliver whatever service that be, whether it's your tech bar or your facilities management within your office or data centres. So I think that's helped us actually. And when people say, okay, well actually I want that piece of data, you can say actually what bit of data do you need, or what information do you need to help you make a decision, because it's neatly defined and structured in a way that helps people again make decisions quicker.